Hello to everyone and welcome to my videos of this Weirdwood Manor ebooks, digital books, and for this time I will publish all the 6 books on these incredible tales. As you can see, they are all ready to start reviewing them, and I will start with the book 2. There are also the first chapter is published, and I will now start on the book 2, complete story of the Weirdwood Manor, the Masters 3. I will publish every book for per 1 week, so there will be new releases every week, one book, and this time it's number 2, book number 2. Thank you for everyone for watching my videos on YouTube channel, and thank you everyone who subscribed to my channel, and if you didn't subscribe it, please subscribe it. And you can also follow all the screens on YouTube, on Facebook.
The enormous front doors groaned as they swung open to reveal the manor's main entryway. Oliver stepped inside, and then he stopped, and he stared. He had heard stories about Weirdwood Manor, about its grandeur, its curious architecture, and its sheer immensity. But nothing could have prepared him for this. Oliver heard a delightful squeal as a thin, bookish woman in a bright floral dress swept him up in a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and oranges. He hadn't had much experience in hugs. Certainly the stiff-armed goodnights from his previous foster parents hadn't counted. But this hug was close and warm. It made him uncomfortable. He blushed, not sure if he should hug her back or squirm away. Before he could do either, the hug ended. The woman stepped back and looked him up and down with an approving smile. Oliver Griffin, our artiste, she giggled, grabbing his hand in hers. It's so nice to finally meet you. I could tell that Arthur was quite impressed with your entry, what with the way he went on about you. I can't wait to see your work. Oliver shook her hand politely. It's nice to meet you too, miss. Oh, how rude of me. Here I am chattering away like a chummy old chipmunk, and I haven't even introduced myself. You can call me Miss Brimley, or Matilda if you like. Some of my students even call me Mad Hilda. But that's another story. She chuckled. Officially, I'm here with the Ministry of Education, making sure you children learn something valuable during your stay. She glanced around the room with mock suspicion, then leaned in. Unofficially, however, I'm going to do my darndest to make sure you kids have the most amazing time of your lives. She winked at him and smiled. Tinsworth cleared his throat impatiently, a hollow, grating sound that set all of his teeth on edge. Miss Brimley's eyes darted up at Tinsworth with just a hint of annoyance, then back to Oliver with an excited smile. Well, let's not waste any more time lily-picking about, she said, standing up. We've got an exciting day ahead of us. They followed Tinsworth through a large cavernous hallway, the purr of his motors echoing softly across the vaulted ceiling and marble floor. This place is just magical, isn't it? Said Miss Brimley in a wistful voice. Oliver nodded. He'd never seen anything like it before. Not in books or on TV, and definitely not in real life. But there was more to it than that. There was something about this place he couldn't quite put his finger on. A feeling that buzzed at the edge of his senses. He supposed Miss Brimley's magical was as good a description as any. They passed through a doorway and into a room full of books, paintings, and elegant wooden cases displaying collections of strange and curious items. Oliver glimpsed a familiar shape out of the corner of his eye and stopped. No way, he whispered, taking a step toward a small winged creature in one of the display cases. He glanced back at Tinsworth and Miss Brimley, who were already passing into the next room, and seemed to not have noticed he had fallen behind. He hesitated for a brief moment, then made his way quickly over to the display case. No way, Oliver said again, shaking his head in disbelief. Standing on the small pedestal before him was a detailed and incredibly accurate recreation of a creature he had known for many years. The soft fur, the gold-tinged feathers, the tiny teeth, and even the playful smile in its eyes were perfect. This was one of Oliver's Edelings. He had been just 5 years old when he'd first seen one of these tiny feathered dragons. He'd called them Edelings after the eerie calls they made, a keening that sounded like they were crying, "Eed, Eed, Eed." They had been the first and most frequent of the many dreamlike visitors he had seen over the years. He liked them. They were playful, mischievous, and really quite intelligent. But, more importantly, they were proof that his strange visions were more than just hallucinations. 2 years ago, Arthur Weirdwood released a book called Arrow of the Skykin. It was an incredible adventure, full of floating islands, dastardly sky pirates, heroic dragon riders, and Edlings. At first, Oliver thought it was just a neat coincidence. One of the characters, an orphan boy named Elvery, had a small feathered dragon he called Edie. As the book progressed, the similarities between Elvery's Edie and Oliver's Edling grew, even to the point where her call was described as sounding like an Eed, Eed, Eed. Then he had come to an illustration of Elvery and Edie. A thrill of excitement and fear had coursed up his spine as he peered at the impossible image. Although older and dressed in the clothes of the Skykin, the boy looked incredibly similar to Oliver. Edie, on the other hand, looked exactly the same as one of Oliver's Edlings, right down to the tiniest detail. The image had scared him, confused him, and at the same time given him hope. Was this just some incredibly bizarre coincidence? Or had the great Arthur Weirdwood somehow seen what he'd seen and heard what he'd heard? For the first time in his life, Oliver had dared to hope that he might not be alone. For the first time, he was able to believe that there just might be answers. Then he saw it. Beneath the mounted Edling was a large leather-bound book with the words, "The Discovery of Edlings," etched on the cover. Oliver's eyes lit up. "Answers," he whispered. But the book was encased in thick glass that seemed to be locked by some sort of mechanical device. Oliver heard Miss Brimley calling after him. He didn't have much time. There was a familiar symbol set into the middle of the case, a room Oliver recognized from illustrations in Arrow of the Skykin. He touched it, and with a mechanical whir, other rooms began to slide out and click into place all around the cabinet. "Amazing," Oliver said. He recognized these rooms too. He didn't remember what each meant, but he had pored over the book many times and had made copies of anything he thought could help him find out more about Edlings, including the room wheel of the Skykin. He whipped out his sketchbook and found the page. He smiled. Oliver picked up the book with trembling hands. He opened it up to somewhere in the middle and landed on a page entitled "The Orphan's Pets." He was just about to start reading when a stiff metal hand clamped down on the book and pulled it firmly from Oliver's grasp.
"There will be plenty of opportunity to explore the mansion later, Master Oliver."
Tinsworth's voice was stern as he placed the book back in its holder and relocked the cabinet.
"And I would ask that you please refrain from breaking into locked cabinets during your stay."
Oliver's cheeks flushed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to break into anything. It's just that..."
"No need to explain, Master Oliver. Youthful curiosity has been known to, on occasion, cloud one's better judgment."
Tinsworth gave him a dismissive look.
"Now, if you will follow me."
Oliver clenched his fists. He had been holding the answers to his life's questions in his hands, only to have them ripped away by an impatient butler who thought of him as nothing more than a nosy little boy. He took one last, longing look at the book, then spotted a small scrap of paper lying on the floor. It must have fallen out when Tinsworth grabbed the book. He snatched it up and stuffed it quickly into his sketchbook. Tinsworth looked over his shoulder and raised an eyebrow, but Oliver just smiled. They soon arrived at what appeared to be a sort of reading nook. Plush sofas and lavish chairs were arranged in a cozy semicircle beside the towering bookshelves. A boy and a girl both stood up as they approached. The boy had thick glasses and a funky brown bowler hat. He gave Oliver a big, excited grin as they drew near. The girl was pretty, very pretty. She smiled politely and nodded at Oliver. He smiled back, then looked quickly away. He felt his cheeks starting to go red and got really annoyed with himself. He hoped she hadn't noticed.
Master Oliver Griffin,
Announced Tinsworth.
I'd like you to meet Master Eugene Donalds and Miss Celia May.
He bowed slightly as the children said their hellos.
And now, children, if you'll excuse me, I shall go to prepare your rooms. Miss Brimley.
He nodded at them crisply and exited the hall with smooth, mechanical grace. Amazing, right? The boy, Eugene, said in a hushed voice. They say he used to be a real man, but he had some sort of gruesome accident, and now he's like 90% mechanical. He leaned in closer. Even some of his brain is robot now. Right barmy, if you're asking me. Brimley interrupted before Oliver could ask what balmy meant. All right, children. Mr. Weirdwood will be joining us in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, why don't we get to know each other a bit? Have a seat. She waved them to sit down. Oliver took a seat on one of the Chesterfields and was surprised when Celia sat down next to him. He tried hard to just relax, play it cool, but he could feel his cheeks starting to get red again. So annoying, he thought. Oh, that looks like quite a sunburn you have there, said a sweet, sympathetic voice beside him. Oliver's insides twisted at the almost musical quality of the voice. He turned to her with a shy smile. Oh, thanks. I mean, yeah, it's not actually a sunburn per se, just kind of warm in here, and he trailed off when he caught the teasing smile in her eyes. Oliver thought he was going to die of embarrassment. Thankfully, Miss Brimley began to speak. So, how about we all share a bit about who we are and how we got here? Who would like to start? Eugene's hand shot up, and he began speaking even before Miss Brimley had a chance to acknowledge him. So, I'm Eugene, spelled the normal way. If there's a normal way to spell Eugene. He chuckled at his own joke. Anyway, I'm pretty much the world expert on all things sci-fi and fantasy. Books, TV, movies, RPGs, ARGs, MMOs. You name it, I know it. Oh, but I don't do vampires. Don't get me started on how they ruined vampires. Although, you'd probably like them now, wouldn't you, Celia? Celia just snorted at him. He pulled something that looked like a pen out of his pocket and twirled it in his fingers. Tinkering. That's my joy, my life, my... how the Frenchies say. My raison d'être. Raison d'être, corrected Celia in perfect Parisian French. Right. Anyway, it's how I get me giggles. These days I'm building working replicas of my favorite sci-fi gadgets. This little beaut right here was my ticket to Weirdwood. 20 points to the first person to guess what it is. He paused. After a somewhat awkward silence, Miss Brimley hazarded a guess. Well, it looks like a pen of some sort. Eugene looked a little disappointed, but only for a moment. Yes, well, I suppose it does have that function too. 5 points for making yourself heard, Miss Brimley. He brightened, twirled the device again, then held it out for all to see. This, my newfound friends, is a fully functional replica of the Pendragon from the world's best sci-fi series in history, The Amazing Who. Watch this. He snapped his hand forward in a dramatic pose as a beam of green light shot out from the Pendragon and onto Oliver's chest. Brimley let out a shriek, and Celia gave Oliver a look of surprised horror. He looked down and saw a fleshy, round hole in the middle of his chest. Eugene chuckled as he flicked the device and the hole disappeared. Brilliant, right? The Amazing Who's death ray. Just a trick, though, as it doesn't actually cause death or anything. Really? Just a simple matter of pulsar-refractive projection. Oh, and check this out. Eugene flicked another switch. A half-dozen ghouls appeared out of nowhere and began to swoop around the room with horrible, if somewhat tinny-sounding, groans. Oliver shivered as one of the ghosts flew through him. From certain angles, they looked kind of flat and distorted, but still, this was really impressive stuff. Eugene was grinning from ear to ear as he watched his ghastly creations float around the room. Season 8, Episode 14 of The Amazing Who, when that evil Dr. Wen, who had trapped Who in the werecage, released a whole whack of wereghosts who were confused about where they were and caused a whole world of war for the warriors of Witchwood. Eugene took a deep breath. Now that's good programming. Oliver put his hand through one of the wereghosts. So, are they holograms or... Eugene's eyes lit up. Actually, there's something better. I call them specters. Synchronetic phase electrocoil teleoptical resonance systems. I'm gonna submit the plans to the Young Inventors World Congress this year. Anyway, the real fun is getting them back into the Pendragon. Here, Oliver, why don't you give it a try? Eugene deftly tossed the device to Oliver, who just barely caught it. It was heavier than it looked, but more surprising was that it buzzed with that strange yet familiar power that always accompanied one of Oliver's visions. Eugene misread his hesitation and said, Right, just push the wee button on the left there and get to sucking those ghastly ghoulies right back into the Pendragon. Oliver handed the Pendragon back to Eugene. That was awesome! Thanks, mate. Knuckle pop with well respect. The two boys bumped knuckles and sat down beside each other. Oliver thought that Eugene was probably the oddest, nerdiest, and yet, somehow, the coolest person he'd ever met. Well, that was wonderful, Eugene! Brimley clapped her hands together and gave Eugene a proud smile. Those wereghosts were really quite good. Of course, in real life, it would be horribly impolite to go around sucking them up like that. They're terribly sensitive creatures, you know. Eugene gave Brimley a confused look, but she continued. Celia, how do you feel about going next? Celia nodded and stood up. Eugene leaned over and whispered in Oliver's ear. Now there's a babosaurus, if I ever seen one. I'm gonna make a move. Chicks go nuts for nerds these days. 'Tis the age of the dweeb, my friend. She's not really my type, Oliver said, which wasn't a total lie. Talented, intelligent, beautiful girls tended to avoid Oliver like the plague. He figured he wouldn't get on well with someone who treated him like a disease. Eugene sat back and cracked his knuckles. Great, then it's settled. His smug smile annoyed Oliver way more than it should have. Celia cleared her throat and stood poised, as if she was about to deliver a speech or perform a monologue. My name is Celia May, and I am a writer. Every word she said was perfectly articulated, and even though her voice was soft, it seemed to carry to every corner of the room. My latest work is an award-winning novella called Song of the Black Moth. It's a story about a girl, a fragile creature who falls deeply in love. The desire for her beloved eats away at her mind, body, and soul, until she becomes a mere shadow of the creature she once was. Then, in the Shadowlands where she has come to dwell, she finds herself anew as she learns to embrace the difficult truth. That love is tragedy unaware. Oliver was surprised. He didn't think of himself as an overly emotional person, but something in her words just got him right in the guts. He looked over at Eugene, who was rubbing his eyes and muttering something about ninjas cutting onions. Miss Brimley blew her nose loudly into a lacy handkerchief. Celia's posture relaxed, and the entrancing nature of a word seemed to fade. That's just a rough overview. Of course, it's much more thoughtful and heart-wrenchingly tragic than that brief description would allow. I've actually already won a few competitions with it, including this one. It comes out in hardcover in a couple of months, but if you'd like to read it sooner, I did bring a few extra copies. Brimley finished wiping the tears from her eyes and said, "That was beautiful, Celia. Magnificent. I can't wait to read it. Oh, and I wish we had more time for you to share, but Arthur will be here any moment, and we've yet to hear from Oliver." She turned to Oliver and winked encouragingly. "Your turn, Mr. Artist." This was the moment Oliver was dreading. What did he have that could possibly compare with Eugene's Pendragon or Celia's award-winning novella? Sure, he had some fairly decent sketches, but other than the weirdy competition, they had never won him any awards or book deals. Up until now, they had mostly just gotten him in trouble. He cleared his throat and could feel his cheeks start to flush yet again. "Well, I'm Oliver. My last name is Griffin, but some people call me Oliver Twist because, well, I'm an orphan, so..." He gave them a lame smile. Eugene chuckled politely, and Brimley gave Oliver an encouraging thumbs up, which only made him feel even more pitiful. Celia, on the other hand, just chewed her nails and looked generally disinterested. Oliver's cheeks reddened even more. He gritted his teeth, more bothered by his own reaction than by Celia's inattention. nothing like your award-winning stories or your super cool inventions, but I guess Arthur, that is Mr. Weirdwood, liked my drawings enough to invite me along, so here they are. He passed his sketchbook to Eugene. He hadn't thought he would feel so nervous about sharing his work, but Celia and Eugene were two of the most talented people he'd ever met. He braced himself for their reactions.
Holy hand grenades, said Eugene. It's unbelievable, mate. I swear it's looking right at me.
He moved the sketchbook from side to side as if he was checking to see if the monster's eyes would indeed follow him. Both Celia and Miss Brimley came and looked over Eugene's shoulder. Huh, said Celia, somewhat surprised. That's actually pretty good. She looked at Oliver with a sly smile. Nice one, Sunburn. Celia, Brimley tisked, then turned to Oliver. Oh, Oliver, these are spectacular. I mean, spectacular. Eugene turned to another page and examined it closely, then sat bolt upright. Oh, it just moved. The freaky little bugger just winked at me. Brimley laughed. Oh, Eugene, you tease. But really, Oliver, these drawings are incredibly realistic. Eugene cleaned his glasses, then squinted at the drawing suspiciously. Oliver grimaced. It was rare for his drawings to come alive for others, but when they did, well, people tended to react poorly when faced with imaginary monsters who have just jumped out of a sketchbook. He said a silent prayer. They flipped through the pages, oohing and eyeing, until something fell out. Amazing, Miss Brimley said, picking up the page and holding it out for the others to see. Wow, said Celia. Jiminy Cricket's great at Mildred, Eugene gulped. Brimley was holding the letter from Merrill Buxley in her hands, staring at the great dragon who had taken over the page. Oliver hesitated, but when that familiar dark feeling started to creep back, he snatched the paper away from her and stuffed it roughly in his pocket. The feeling subsided. Sorry, Miss Brimley, he said. It's just that, well, that one's not ready yet. He smiled apologetically. What? Eugene spluttered. That was like the best one of the lot. Come on, Oliver, give us another peek. Brimley gave Oliver a strange look and was just about to say something when Arthur, the great Arthur Weirdwood, the world's best-known author, inventor, and artist, entered the room.